So, welcome to the next edition of the Rare Business Podcast. With me today, I have Claire Lew, who is CEO of Know Your Company. Hi, Claire. How are you doing?
Hey, Adrian. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me today.
You're very welcome. Now, Claire, for the benefit of our listeners and readers, can you tell us a little bit about you and also a bit about the work that you do?
Yes, absolutely. So, as you were saying, I run a software company called Know Your Company. And what we do is we make this software tool that helps CEOs of businesses with typically around 25 to 75 employees. We help them overcome growing pains. And the way that we do this is by helping to create an environment in the workplace that's open, that's honest, and where people can get ongoing employee feedback that's actually transparent. So for a lot of CEOs, what happens is that they will, start to hire folks. Maybe they'll hit 10 people and things are feeling really good. And then something really interesting happens right around the 15 person or 20% mark, Adrian, which is that all of a sudden they start to feel like they're losing touch. They feel like, oh man, I don't know what my employees are thinking anymore. I don't really know how they feel about the benefits or about the direction of the company. And it becomes a lot harder for some reason to get the truth. And when you start to then hire quickly and you're trying to move really fast, all of a sudden you start to become blindsided as a leader. So how do you uncover those blind spots? How do you figure out how to get to know your company better? So what our software tool does is we have a whole methodology for, first of all, helping you create an environment where people will feel encouraged to speak up, and then giving you the right questions in the right way at the right time so that you can actually get the truth of how your employees are feeling and help them feel more connected and more fulfilled at work. So that's what we do.
Perfect. And I guess you. So you say you're aimed at kind of smaller companies and CEOs, but I guess equally this could be a tool that a leader of a team or a division or a department could actually kind of take, could get hold of on their own initiative if they wanted to do something within their own kind of team as well. It's not just kind of exclusively for CEOs.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. It's absolutely not exclusive for CEOs, nor is it exclusive just to small companies. That just tends to be the sweet spot. So our largest client, for example, is over 700 people, and they've been one of our longest clients. They actually just recently won, I think Entrepreneur Magazine named them, the second best culture in the United States based off within their size range. So it does work for bigger companies. And just like you said, it also works for managers that own a particular department or are running a particular team in a larger company. So thanks for mentioning that.
Sure. Now, before we get stuck into some of the nuts and bolts of what you do and how you do it, I know that sort of Know Your Company is a spin out from kind of Basecamp. And the reason I ask this is, one, because I'm a bit of a fan of Basecamp, and I also spoke to Chase Clemens at Basecamp on the podcast kind of recently about some of the support stuff that they do. So can you tell me a little bit about the backstory of that? How it kind of you came to be? I guess you were born, or Know Your Company was born, and then kind of now you're not with Basecamp anymore, and it's like, have you been adopted
it's a weird
or something,
story.
or something, or I don't know. Fill in the blanks for us.
Right. Yes, it is a weird story, and that's very cool that you had Chase on the podcast. He's wonderful and brilliant. So we are, like you were saying, a spinoff of Basecamp. So what happened is prior to me running Know Your Company, I'll give you actually a little bit of backstory about me, Adrian, because it sort of informs the story, which is prior to running Know Your Company, I'd started a company first coming out of college, did that for a little bit, and then left that company to figure out what I really wanted to do. And so I was maybe 23, 22 at the time. So I decided, I've never worked for anyone before. Maybe I should go do that. So I went to go work at a small early stage startup right outside Chicago. So I'm based here still in Chicago. So it was right outside Chicago. It was about a 6-person team. And while I was there, I hated my job. Right. Absolutely hated it. And the reason I hated it so much was because of this problem of feedback. So as an employee, I felt like I couldn't be honest with my boss. I felt like I couldn't bring up suggestions and critical opinions to the CEO. And it drove me absolutely nuts. And I racked my brain for the longest time trying to figure out, is it just me? Am I just being a disgruntled employee? Like, do I just need to get over myself? Is this an ego thing? Because I've never worked for anyone before. I was really frustrated with it and was trying to figure out why, and realized that it wasn't just me, that this was something that all the employees actually at the company felt. And not only that, but you talk to, friends, you start to study the problem, which is what I did. I started to do some tremendous research, which is that this is a problem. The problem of not knowing your company and not getting feedback. This is a problem that exists in every single company. So I decided to quit my job and to build a solution to solve it. And what I originally did was I started a consulting practice working with CEOs one-on-one to help them get to know their company better and uncover their blind spots. And my first client was actually Basecamp. So yeah, exactly. So Jason Fried, who's the CEO of Basecamp, he also happens to live in Chicago. And funny enough, I got to meet Jason because he and Basecamp were actually the only investors in the very, very first company that I started, first coming out of school. And they had invested in the company after I left, though, so I'd never gotten to meet him. So finally, I get to connect with Jason. I tell him, what I'm working on, and he goes, "Claire, this is nuts, because this is the biggest problem I'm facing right now as a CEO. I feel like I don't know my company." Right. So two things: one, can we hire you to be a consultant? Can we be your first client? And second, we actually happen to be building our own software product around this because it's just been bugging me so much. And that was Know Your Company. So what happened, Adrian, is I did this initial consulting project for them. We kept in touch about the product as they were building it out. And as they started to build their company first out as a prototype, they saw, wow, we could sell this. So they started selling it to companies. It took off. And it got to a point after 6 months of Basecamp selling the product, they had gotten, I think, almost 100 customers in a 6-month period of time. They thought, wow, this is a business. This isn't just a product line. Sure. And it felt a little bit outside their scope of, project management software. And they really wanted to double down on working on Basecamp. So Jason approached me and he said, "Claire, I have this crazy idea that we have never done before. But what if we spun out Know Your Company to be its own company, separate LLC. You ran it as CEO. You own 50% of the company, and you grow the whole thing. And what do you think?" So this is about 4 years ago, Adrian. And as you can imagine, I said yes. Yeah. It was sort of the dream opportunity and dream gig for me. So since January 2014, so for about 3.5 years, I've been running Know Your Company as its own standalone company as a CEO. And yeah, we work with over 15,000 people who use our product in about 25 different countries every single day. Companies, everything from, Airbnb, Kickstarter, Balsamiq, Cards Against Humanity, Help Scout. I know you had the CEO of Help Scout on the blog. We did have Nick on the Francis podcast here.
Yep. It feels like it feels like kind of we're name dropping now, but yeah, no, we did have Nick on just a little while ago.
Perfect. So we are lucky to work with some of the most innovative and most forward-thinking companies in the world, and and that's the backstory and the history to the product.
Super. Well, fair play. That's what a great story. So now on to actually kind of Know Your Company. Can you tell me a bit about what you do and how it works for your clients? Because it seems to me that you're sort of on the edge of the whole employee engagement sort of like space, but it's not like employee engagement surveys. It's kind of deeper than that. It's kind of and it goes into all sorts of different areas. So actually, can you kind of tell us how it works?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the entire product is based on one simple philosophy, which is that the only way you get answers about what you want to know is if you ask questions. So answers only come if you ask questions, right? Really simple philosophy. And so what we do is we built the entire software around asking really, really good questions. And there are 4 different types of questions. So the first set of questions is something that we call an icebreaker. We believe that the only way people are going to feel comfortable enough to speak up in a company and give their honest opinion is if they feel like they're knowing each other socially. So we kick off the product with something called an icebreaker where we ask 5 or so fun questions like, what's the weirdest thing you've ever eaten? What's the best book you've ever read? Where everyone from the CEO to the most junior employee gets to participate in and see everyone's answers. Now, every single one of the questions that I'm going to talk about too, and that, we ask, including the icebreaker, these are all delivered via email. Right. So if you can imagine, you open up your, email inbox, you see, oh, cool, like I've got a new icebreaker. Maybe I just joined the company. So it's actually a really wonderful way for onboarding new hires. First thing you get when you come into the office, oh, wow, cool, this icebreaker. Yeah. So you get to actually read everyone's previous responses, and then you get to fill out your own. And email, it takes like a few minutes, and then it gets sent out to everyone. And then the reason we use email as the channel to deliver all the questions is it means that employees don't have to log into anything to use the software. They don't have to remember a password. They don't have to upload a profile. We find that just use the existing tools and mediums that people already do instead of asking them to learn something new. So that's why we use email. Now, there is a back end, which I'll talk about a little bit later, of what managers and CEOs can actually log into. But on the employee side, just make it easy for people. That's a huge reason why people don't give feedback, is because it's hard. Yep. So let's make it easy. So, yep, exactly. So that's the first set of questions, is the icebreaker. Then what happens is every single week you get 3 different questions. The first is what we call the heartbeat question. It's asked every Monday. And the whole idea around this is the fact that most companies feel like they have no clue what everyone in the company is working on. If I'm an engineer, I don't really know what sales is doing. If I work on the HR and admin team, I have no clue what the design team is working on. So it ends up creating silos in companies, especially as they grow. So that's what the heartbeat question does to dissolve. It just asks, what are you working on every week? And you fill it out. And then the next day, everyone gets to see the responses. So that's a heartbeat question. Then on Wednesdays, we ask something called the company question. And this is the question that most CEOs probably see the biggest impact from. Right. So what we do, Adrian, is we ask a different question every Wednesday on something specific in your company. So for example, we might ask something like, is there anyone in the company you'd like to apprentice under?
Right.
Okay. Which, by the way, 92% of employees that we've surveyed, over thousands of employees, right? 92% say, yes, there's someone in the company I'd like to apprentice under. 92%.
Wow.
Okay? Another question yeah, exactly. So essentially, if you don't have some sort of apprenticeship or a mentorship program in your company, you should probably be doing that, right? That's something that a lot of CEOs learn immediately, in the first 3 weeks of using the product. Another question we'll ask is something like, are you afraid of anything at work? Right. And 67% of employees will say, yes, I'm afraid of something at work. Okay. So for CEOs, again, a really, big eye opener. They're like, oh my goodness, what are they afraid of? Is it their manager? Is it of a, certain process we have? There's a lot to dig into. So, we ask a lot. Another question might be, is there anything, that our competitors have done that has made you gone, oh, I wish we could do that? And I believe it's around 70% of employees have said yes to that. Right. So they notice things that competitors have done, right? So uncovering blind spots. And the interesting thing about this question here is an employee has the option to either share it publicly or they can send it just to the CEO.
Right. Okay. That was going to be my question. That is it anonymous or is it completely open?
Right. It is completely open. So there is a sense of privacy in that if an employee does feel, you know what, I do think this would be better just for the CEO's eyes, that's totally enabled, but we don't enable people to just remove their name completely. And there's a reason for that. So I'm a big proponent of truly believing that anonymous feedback is completely evil. I think it is totally counterintuitive and destructive for so many companies that we've actually worked with, and we've seen how when they use anonymous feedback and anonymous surveys, it just doesn't work. And it's for 2 reasons. So the first is that when you ask for anonymous feedback, it instantly instills a sense of distrust for employees. People start to get weirded out. They go, I wonder who's reading my responses. If you do read the responses, you start trying to guess who said what. And if you do read something and you go, that's really weird, it becomes a witch hunt culture to try to, figure out who that person is. It's bad. So culturally, it's bad. And then 2, it's really hard to act on anonymous feedback. Let's say you get a piece of feedback about how a project could be better, but you don't know which project. You don't even know which department. So many CEOs that we've worked with who have rolled out anonymous surveys almost instantly regret it. And they come to us because they say, I have no idea what to do with my anonymous survey results. It was completely unhelpful.
Yeah.
So yes, so that's the company question. And then the last question is what we call the social question. So this is asked every Friday. So again, in the spirit of knowing that a big part of why employees leave companies is because they feel like they don't connect and are a part of the greater culture in the company. That's what the social questions solves, especially as you grow, especially as you get bigger, and if you are a remote team and you don't see people face to face. So every Friday we'll ask something fun like, what's your favorite breakfast food? Or did you ever have a bad haircut as a kid? And if you can imagine, and you're running a 40, 60, 70 person company, and you see people's answers to that. I mean, it's hilarious. And if I've never talked to someone in accounting, it makes me feel like I can work with them better. If I've never talked to someone who lives on the other side of the country, right, you feel a greater sense of connectedness in that sense. So CEOs, will always say, and employees will always say, it's easily the most enjoyable part of the software, along with the icebreakers answering those social questions. So that's really the software on the most basic level. There is a back end where you're able, as a manager and CEO, to log in, and you can be able to identify trends. You can write notes about employees, and you have a full history to see every single person's timeline and the company's timeline to understand and look at what questions are revealing different insights, what are things I should be following up with, et cetera.
And so the sort of the back end, is there analytics that, when you say identifies kind of trends, is it trends in that it spots kind of like words that are coming up, or does that identify the issues, or how does that work?
Yeah, great point. So we leave the identification of trends up to the user itself. So we actually purposely don't do any sort of sentiment analysis or word analysis, or don't show any graphs of that sense. And that's very intentional. We simply want a CEO to be able to honestly just take the insights from the software and then go talk to the person in person. Okay. We think that a lot of times when you have too many graphs, too many stats, it can be really distracting to actually seeing what the underlying root issues are. The greatest cause of communication breakdown, or why an employee doesn't feel heard, or why an employee is upset about something, the solution to it is usually to just go talk to them about it.
Yeah.
Like 99% of the time, right? And so if we build too much into the software where it's, oh, hey, look at these, look at this analytics, look at this, this percentage, this blip here, it becomes totally distracting from the fact that really the best way to do something about this is just to go talk to the person.
Sure. And so tell me, you talked about 4 different types of questions, and then these questions kind of change. I mean, I just think about kind of adoption and implementation of that type of stuff, about getting to know your kind of people. Yes. I mean, and also the idea, I'd be horrified if somebody said to me, you have to come up with all your own questions. You get to about 10.
Oh, yes.
And then you'd be like, kind of, so how does that, do customers have to come up with their own questions, or how does it work?
That's such a great question. So we actually give you over 300 questions. Okay. So more than 3 years worth of questions, that you can pick and choose from, in addition to hundreds of questions that other CEOs have actually written too. So you get access to community questions and sort of best of questions that are crowdsourced.
Okay.
And then on top of that, what we do, Adrian, is we enable employees to suggest questions themselves. And those are some of the biggest hits as well, as questions are when employees can go, oh, hey, I think this would be a hilarious question to ask on Friday. Or, you know what, I'm really curious to learn more about what our 5-year strategy is. So I'm going to ask a company question around that. So that's a really successful part of the software too. But I completely agree with you. If if we as Know Your Company aren't helping a CEO ask good questions to begin with, then we're failing. So a huge reason for why I think the software is so successful is the magic of the questions we give. And again, it's over 300 of them. So you never run out.
So I can see how that would really work for, I can see how kind of technology kind of firms would adopt this. I can see how it would work for companies that have employees in different time zones, or of remote workers and so on and so forth. But is it just for those type of firms, or does it work with companies as well that have everybody in the same place?
It's another great question. So it definitely does work for companies where everyone is in the same place. Now, of course, we do have a lot of companies and customers who are tech firms and who are remote companies because they happen to feel the pains a little bit more tightly. And tech companies tend to look for technology solutions, I think, a little bit more quickly than and to sort of assume, okay, I just need to get an app to solve my problem, right? So that does tend to be the case, but it's fascinating. I mean, we work with a lot of companies in all sorts of sort of brick and mortar industries, everything from retail to manufacturing to accounting services to different industries, everything from ad agencies to finance to even nonprofits and churches. Funny enough, so it's it's something where the reason for the greatest sort of barometer for whether or not the product will work for you, and trust me, it does not work for everyone. The real barometer is, does the CEO want to know his company? Right. Because if the CEO doesn't want to know the company, then forget about it. We turn people away all the time, and if we feel like they're going to do this for show, or they're not going to really act on the feedback, we'll say, hey, like, I don't know if this is really a great fit. It sounds like we're not really the tool for you. Yeah. And we're okay with doing that because we know what we're trying to help people with, which is we just actually want to help CEOs get to know their company better, but that can't happen if they're not willing to. Yeah. So more than industry, more than location or distribution of team, it's that intent from the CEO that distinguishes whether or not that company will be a good fit for the product, and vice versa.
I think also that it seems to me that there's this assumption that gets made that, particularly with firms that are, located together, as it were, and they're all in kind of one kind of building, that just because people are sat maybe in the same office or on the same floor or kind of whatever, there's this big assumption that because we have proximity to people, physical proximity, that we know what's going on. And that's just nonsense most of the time.
You are so spot on. Absolutely. I think the most telling sort of image or example of that is anytime a company hosts a happy hour, right? I'll often ask a CEO to describe to me what they usually see, which is you will always see people at sort of any social event for a company or happy hour. You'll always see the same groups of people talking to one another the entire time, and it's always the same groups. And it's usually folks who are part of the same team or folks who sit, who work next to each other or work on the same project. And it's not to fault anyone for not branching out, but it's how we operate as humans. We're very tribal, and we like to be around the things that we know. Yeah. And whether or not you are all located in the same city, those tribal affiliations will still emerge just by byproduct of scale. The minute you start to add more people, there will start to be smaller subsections of people who will gravitate more closely to one another. So the idea with Know Your Company is, well, that's great. And everyone, of course, is going to have people they know really well. But how much greater the sense of meaning and connection, growth, and then most importantly, communication and problems that can be solved if we widen that net and we enable people to talk with different folks more often.
Awesome. It sounds like you're like the lubricant that makes the wheels of culture go round.
I like that. I do truly feel, on that note, I do truly feel that culture is really about communication, right? Because if you are not communicating what you believe, what you intend, and how you're acting on things, then people don't know what's the way to do things. Sure. So you have to have communication in place first and foremost.
So Claire, let me kind of sort of take it up a level. So I'm interested in, like I was explaining before, I'm interested in all things to do with like customer service, experience, employee engagement, and all. Yes. How that's a big loop. And what I'd be really interested to understand is if you can give me a couple of examples of sort of client companies what problems they've faced, how they use the product, and what benefits they've seen in terms of solving some of those kind of things. Because I think it feels like a really kind of neat input to address some of those issues.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest problems that we help solve is turnover.
Okay.
And I mean, there are so many examples that I can share of even off a single question that a CEO has been able to shortcut early or learn quickly that someone is thinking about leaving and then to do something about it. So I'll give you an example. One firm, they're actually a remote company with about 40 people. They hired someone new to the team, and in the first, I think it was the first 3 months that she was on board, she submitted a question or answer to the Monday heartbeat question.
Mm-hmm.
And the CEO read it, and he read it and he went, she sounds really overwhelmed. She sounds really overwhelmed with all the things that she's working on. So maybe I'll because of this question, I'm going to set up some time with her.
Mm-hmm.
So because of this one question, he sets up 15 minutes to talk with her, finds out that indeed she is just completely overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, she was even thinking about leaving.
Right.
Or thinking that it wasn't a good fit for her here, right? Because she's so new, she's thinking, oh, maybe this isn't the place for me. And they were able to take some things off her plate, and now she's still at the company. And he told me if he hadn't had that conversation, he's pretty sure she would have left.
Right.
And especially because that first 90 days is a really sensitive time for a new employee to feel like it is a good fit. So that's just one small example of how the product really actually solves for turnover, first and foremost. A second example that comes to mind where we've solved a real problem for a customer is anytime a company goes through some sort of big change in a company. So we work with one big technology company that is an international technology company with about 80 employees, and they decided to get rid of their entire sales department.
Okay.
So they fired all their salespeople. Yeah, big change, right?
Uh-huh.
Very, very big change. And their CEO was very nervous, obviously, as he should be, about what the reception would be. So what he did in Know Your Company is he scheduled a few questions that he tweaked, and you can also write your own questions in Know Your Company. So he wrote a few of his own leading up to this big change, during this big change, and then after this big change in firing and letting go of the entire sales team. And he said that being able to ask those questions and get regular feedback as the process was happening and during the aftermath helped make that transition incredibly smooth. And what it signaled to his employees is that he really cared about their input while they were, going through this big change.
Yeah.
So in terms of helping with change management, Know Your Company has been a tremendous tool for CEOs in that sense too. Perfect. And then the last example I'll share is just around growth. So anytime a company goes through high growth, they often wonder about, if engagement is going to go down, right? So you start to hire really quickly. So one of our biggest companies, growing at an incredible pace, actually the company that I mentioned that's now over 700 people.
Yeah.
What they found is the social question for Know Your Company has been a huge reason for why people have such a good initial positive first impression of the company. So they say that they'll always hear positive comments from new employees as they're hiring of, oh my gosh, I love this Friday question that we get from Know Your Company. Oh, this is so neat. We never did this at my last company.
Sure.
So just another small example for how when you're going through high growth, you want to figure out how to make sure that your folks feel like they have something in common and are having fun.
Excellent. And so, Claire, I mean, we think about all of this sort of stuff and sort of building your sort of understanding of what's going on in a company like Know Your Company, as it were. But if somebody's kind of like listening to this or reading the highlights, and they kind of say, "Yeah, I'd like to start kind of on that sort of journey of improving my understanding." I mean, apart from subscribing to your kind of product, obviously, are there some preparation or pre-steps that they should take, and where should they start?
Definitely. That's such a good question. Absolutely. So I always recommend folks to visit our knowledge center. So if you go to knowyourcompany.com/learn, we actually have in-depth chapters that we've written on 4 to 5 different aspects of how to build an open and honest company culture. So we start by talking about blind spots and what the top leadership blind spots are, how to identify blind spots. We talk about asking for feedback, how to get feedback from employees that you typically never hear from. What are the best questions to ask? We talk about receiving feedback, giving feedback, acting on feedback. And so it's a great primer for thinking about, even like you were saying, beyond software, but culturally and from a leadership perspective, based on the data that we've collected, what's the playbook for creating an open and honest culture? So we always recommend folks to check that out. We also have a mini Yeah, we also have a mini course as well that I get totally free, by the way. All this is free. This isn't to sell anything. It's just
Sure.
knowledge and expertise that we've gained. We have a mini course as well where it's a 5-lesson course on how to get honest feedback from your employees, and that's something that you can also sign up for on the website. But really, like I was saying again, just really studying and understanding what are the ways that what are the elements of how one creates an open and honest culture. That's the best place to start.
Perfect. So, Claire, is there anything that we've missed out that you'd like to share before I ask you my 2 final questions?
I don't think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I want to hear what the 2 questions are. I'm eagerly awaiting those.
Right. So the first one is is sort of a bit of a selfish one, and it's a piece of personal market research, as you were. And because last year I wrote a book called How to Wow, and it came out. It was published by Pearson, and it came out in sort of, I think it was April of last year. But ever since then, and most of the podcasts that I've been kind of doing, I've been asking everybody I've spoken to for what is their perspective or what is their take on what is wow service or experience. So I'd be interested to hear what your take on that is. What is it? What would it constitute for you?
A wow experience. What would it constitute? Mm-hmm. I think a wow experience includes 3 things. The first is being brutally honest. Mm-hmm. I think the companies that are able to be completely straight, ruthlessly honest about what's going well, what they're working on, how they're trying to help their customers, those are the companies that are successful. And especially in being brutally honest in how they handle their mistakes. Mm-hmm. Really quick aside, I remember one of the biggest mistakes that we made with Know Your Company was a technical flaw that we found in the product about a year and a half ago. Mm-hmm. And so there was this technical error. What it caused was it caused people who were not the CEO to view some of the private responses, and it affected every single company.
Wow.
And we didn't catch it. Yeah, we didn't catch it until about a year and a half into the software. And so huge mistake. It could result in lack of trust. It could result in, honestly, our entire customer base leaving. And I was faced with this really interesting dilemma, which was, do I tell our customers about it or not? Mm-hmm. Because here's the thing. No one had told me, right, about this problem.
Right.
We'd found it on our own. So this dilemma of how honest do we be, right? And what we decided to do is I wrote a personal email to every single customer that was affected. And at the time, it wasn't an enormous amount. Wrote a personal email, said exactly what the problem was, how sorry we were, what we were going to do to fix it, and then offered comped accounts for different companies depending on how many employees were affected by it.
Sure.
And then I braced myself for the response. Okay.
Yeah.
Here's the most fascinating thing that happened. I got a flood of responses. Okay, but they were all enormously positive. It was, thank you, Claire, so much for being so upfront with us. Or, wow, Claire, I forwarded your email to my team because I want to show them how to handle their mistake. Or this earned my trust in you even more. Or we even had one, I think it was a Dutch customer who said that there's a phrase, I think it's a Dutch phrase, that says mistakes are made while you're doing work. So thanks for doing work and no worries, mistakes happen. So this incredible trust and understanding, and honestly, people thinking it was a wow experience and how we handled a mistake because of how honest we were.
Cool.
So that's probably my biggest thing. And then 2 other small things for how, I think what constitutes a wow experience is being personal, right? If you can actually care and show that you're a human, that always wows people. It wows me. I'll put it at that. When I receive that on the other end and they talk to me like I'm a human instead of just a number to count, means a lot. And and then the last thing is anytime that you can actually do something for a customer instead of having them do it yourselves, that also is a wow experience. And we try to do that a lot with Know Your Company. Is whenever someone asks us a question, a support question, we just try to do it for them instead of saying, here's how you do it. Right? We'll share that too, but we just try to do it for them. So just trying to save people time, make it, be helpful as possible.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And so that brings me to my final question that I always ask at the end of these interviews. And the question is this.
All right, I'm ready.
Are you ready? So,
yes.
Claire, is there anything that you would like to shamelessly plug?
Oh, wow. I was not expecting that. I would like to shamelessly plug our product. I truly do believe that if you work at a company
Hmm.
or are a CEO of a company that is less than 150 people
Hmm.
and you care about your culture and you want to make sure that as you grow, that you maintain that culture,
Hmm.
you should give our product a shot because I assure you it's going to help with turnover, it's going to help with retention, it'll help with your culture as you grow, and you'll learn something. Most importantly, you'll learn something new and surprising every single week. So that's what I'd like to shamelessly plug is just give us a shot.
Claire, that's perfect. And just want to say, one, congratulations on your success. Congratulations on the work that you're
Thank
doing.
you.
And also just want to say thank you for your time and sharing your experience with us today. That's been brilliant.
Thank you, Adrian. I really appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun.